I think people underestimate the ability of starting small. Have an idea for a business. Oh, I want to be able to offer all these services or have all these products. And I would say most of the time that is not how businesses start. I started with one design, no screen printing press, had them printed, and you just grow from there. You go to the next thing, It's a slow process kind of in general. You're not jumping in to a million things at once. I can't emphasize enough the importance and the value, I guess, of starting small.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode here on the Business Breakthrough New York podcast. Today, we have an extremely special guest, the newest member to the Farmingdale Small Business Development Center right here on Long Island, Brandon DeFeo. Brandon has a lot of experience within the realms of managing and owning businesses in numerous different industries. And so I wanted to bring him on today so that he could talk to us a little bit about his experience and any tips and strategies that he might have for us, for those that are considering taking that next step and going into entrepreneurship. So welcome, Brandon. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Outstanding. So I'm curious, where have you spent the most time of your own when it comes into owning your own business and managing and things like that?
So spending the most time actually owning my own and managing my own business was when I was 18 years old. In 2017, I started a t-shirt business called Rudy's Tees. So I actually named it after my dog. His name is Rudy. He's a West Highland Terrier. If you look at our logo, he's a little Westies on the logo. So he's like the pride and joy in our family. So I was like, I didn't have it in me to name it after myself or anything like that. So I'm going to name it after Rudy. I'm going to name it after the dog.
Do you have an active website or anything for it?
I do, yes. It's still.
Yeah, I just want to see if we can pull up the logo. I'm very curious now.
Actually, just the website actually might not be up. Either go to Instagram or just Google Rudy's Tees. Northport, it should come up.
Perfect.
So in 2017, I started Rudy's Tees. So I started it with the intention of growing up in Northport. That's where I've grown up, and working in Northport Village. That's where I had my first job, and most of my jobs really were working on Main Street in Northport. Mm-hmm. Northport is a very history-rich town. They have so many historical business that either came and went or that are still active today. So when I first started, I started a collection of T-shirt designs called the Real Vintage Collection. So was a graphic design minor, business management major here at Farmingdale. So I came up with all the designs myself of old logos my rendition of an old logo from Northport, historical Northport businesses.
Oh, that's really creative. I like that.
And each shirt would come with a history card giving a paragraph.
Oh, wow.
To help spread the town's history.
I love it.
It was a cool idea. We partnered with, first being the Northport Historical Society, working with them to get different, businesses, the history, to sell the shirt and market everything. And we eventually grew it to Huntington, Green Lawn. We partnered with those historical societies and expanded it that way.
That's beautiful. I love that. I'm curious about kind of your foundation and where you started. Like, how did we get from Brandon as a kid, walking around playing games, playing football, whatever, and then going maybe lacrosse for up here, and then shifting into entrepreneurship? Like, when did this happen? Did you have a subtle shift where it's like, oh, that's something I can do? Or how did the idea of owning your own business or doing something entrepreneurial, like starting your own t-shirt business, how did that come into play?
So I always had a entrepreneurial upbringing, I guess you could call it. My father, he owned several businesses throughout his life and still does. First being he was in TV and film, so he had a post-production house. And I really grew up going to work with him in the city and always seeing him lead and generate ideas. Oh, this would be great, and how to implement this. So it was always kind of there, and I always was drawn to it. After that, he had owned a magazine for several years, which I was a little bit more involved in, like the publishing aspect and the media aspect. And then most recently, my family purchased a hardware store in East Northport. So then it was a whole nother door that was opened as far as learning retail business.
The diversity of the different businesses also has to have an impact, because it's one thing to have a kind of a serial entrepreneur. Maybe it's this tech business, then that tech business, and then that, and there's all these different kind of tech applications. Right. But you're just all over the place, which is, and especially for a kid, like to be able to experience that and to see that kind of diversity. What you grow up around is your norm. It's your standard. And so you had a great opportunity, great kind of launching point into this as, entrepreneurship is just like the way of life. This isn't
Exactly.
like, isn't this how everyone? That's not what your dad does.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah, it was when I realized when I got older, it was almost, oh, people just work 9 to 5 and then do these.
Right.
And they have weekends off. What is that?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
it's like what?
yeah, weekends come when we're transitioning
Yeah.
businesses. All right, that's the weekend.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Oh, here we go. We got Rudy's. Are we sharing it too? Yeah. You're beautiful. Oh my gosh. I love the dog. That's so great. So how did you come up with this? Obviously it was the dog, but just from your graphics design experience, just started going through.
Yeah, I just kind of like
Playing with some
the
things.
look of almost kind of like a ribbon, almost. It's just very simple and clean look.
Sure.
That was like a big thing for me starting off. And something I was, I guess, kind of worried about was creating the brand, seeing how you want it to be seen.
100%.
You know, that's not an easy thing to do.
No, yeah, brand is the reputation, you know, and you have to. The logo is super important because it's the reminder. You need in order to brand. I'm curious for your take on this because this is the way that I've always seen it and the way I've done it in my businesses is it's about the relationships and how you treat people, and once you do that, and then word starts to spread about how you do business, like, oh, you can really count on them, like their customer service is great and everything, and then that word spreads, people hear about it, then they have it, and you have to keep that up. It's a consistency thing. Right. And so then people then begin to associate that image, that graphic design with how you operate. And that's really what brand is.
Correct.
And so, yeah. And so it's cool that you went like the ribbon route and everything, but then there was a playful nature to it.
Yes.
You know? And so it wasn't overly serious and
Right.
history can be really boring, I guess, for a lot of people. You know, not for me. I'm a buff. But being able to integrate like cool new T-shirts about the area that you
more
live
like
in.
of a modern
piece
to it almost.
Yes.
You know, to make, like you said, make it more interesting.
Right.
You know, and we eventually, that's how I started, was doing the real vintage collection and doing other designs just kind of based off of Northport. It wasn't all the real vintage collection. That's how I started. Then we kind of expanded doing one of like the Northport dock and the smokestacks. I don't
Do you
know how
have
familiar
pictures
you are.
of the T-shirts on Instagram?
Yeah, they're up there. This is Cal Harbor Day, which is like an event in Northport they do once a year in September, where I would set up a booth and we would do that.
Oh, that's great.
Then we got into the whole custom screen printing.
And you could tell that
business.
that shirt's high quality too. I've messed around with a lot of T-shirts from companies, and like when they're producing something high quality, like the material when they're choosing the different materials.
Yeah, you learn fast what's good and what's not.
Sure.
Once you get the samples in, you could just tell.
This is great. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, we did things for the Northport High School marching band.
And that's so
several-
smart too, because you
several
pick like you see the same stuff from a lot of businesses where there'll be like the T-shirts, there'll be maybe hats, there'll be like hoodies, but like pajama pants. Like how big is that?
Yeah, pajama pants, tote bag, shorts,
Yes.
beanies.
Did you get into any sort of like yoga pants, leggings kind of things?
Oh, we would do some of those.
Yeah, because that seems
Sweatpants.
That seemed popular.
Crop tops. There they go. Hats, like
Yes.
embroidery.
Oh, look at that! And so all of these.
That's Rudy.
Oh, that's Rudy.
That's Rudy.
That's the inspiration.
That's Rudy. That's the inspiration. That's him.
Oh my god, I'm so happy right now. This literally just made my day. Oh my gosh, get all the bubbles, Rudy. You got this. You got this.
Bubbles.
And it's so clean. It's so clean. The color coordination is great. Like, how did you work through to develop with all of these different designs? Because there's so many different ones. What was your process of creating those? Did you work with like a team, or was it just you?
So in the beginning, it was mainly just me. It was
Yeah.
like, all right, I have this idea. Let me draw it first,
Sure.
or try to get it into like Adobe Illustrator.
And that is another kind of more nuanced technical question that I'm glad you kind of dove into. Is like, would you sketch frequently on paper first, or do you start in an app or in a?
Me personally, I would usually always start sketching it.
Okay.
That's just for me because it's easier to. This is kind of what I want to do.
Got it.
And it would in the beginning. That was all me doing the designs. I'd come up with the idea, I'd sketch it, work it in Illustrator, and pretty much take it from there.
Okay.
When we grew and we were doing more of the custom work and big orders for clients and stuff like that, that just takes so much time. Yep. So what I actually did was one of the first, I guess, milestones, I guess you could call it,
Sure.
with growing Rudy's Tees was I had brought on an intern. She was a graphic design major here at Farmingdale. Brought her on as an intern and then ended up hiring her to do independent contracting work through me, which was awesome.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And that's such an important step, I think, for people that you can get really caught up in kind of been around the axle about this as somebody that's starting their own business, and if they've been operating for a while as like a solopreneur, the idea of delegation when you're the one that's wearing literally all of the hats. Yeah. So all of the marketing, all of the sales, all of the product creation, figuring out who's going to make it, what country am I going to have the shirts made in, and everything. It's all on you. And so when you get to that point, how long were you operating before you knew, not necessarily made the decision, before it hit you like, I need another person. I need somebody to come in here and do this work for me.
So I would say it was probably about 2 years in.
Okay.
Where it really started to get, this is a little too much and I have to like spread it out. I had my friend Greg, he helped me a lot. He works for me part-time.
Oh, great.
So he would do that. So really those were Ivy was the designer and Greg was my go-to guy for pretty much anything that I needed.
Got it. Chief of staff.
Yeah, exactly. Because as you learn and grow. So when I first started, I wasn't doing any of the printing myself. I was outsourcing it to a place in Florida, actually.
Oh, wow.
So it was very important to me to have it
Made in
printed,
America.
Printed here in the U.S.
Go.
Yeah. So it was a good way to start because, in the beginning, that was important to me to have them printed here in the U.S. Yeah. So margins were tighter in the beginning, but after about a year and a half, I said, I'm jumping in with both feet. I bought a press, set it up, and I knew nothing about screen printing, and it was completely self-taught. And then within 6 months after that, I was doing like 500-piece professional job orders.
And what is your thought process, like when you're doing that, you're making that decision, like, obviously there's the financial motivation that like, I'm going to save so much money if I just do this myself. But without knowing, were you continuing production up through Florida as you got the equipment necessary to do your printing, and then you were kind of figuring out while you were still selling and getting product from Florida?
Yeah, correct. Okay. So it was when I was comfortable, like I know I could do a professional job that I'm not going to mess it up really. Okay. That's when I did it. But there was also that little bit of a leap of faith where it's still kind of intimidating.
Yeah.
It's like something that I was always taught, which might not be the best practice, but it's like say yes, figure it out now, figure it out later, because it kind of pushes you to grow. At least for me, that's what it does. If you're always kind of afraid and you always kind of play it too safe, you don't really grow, or you don't grow as quickly.
That's brilliant. I think it's great. I mean, obviously you have to take each situation on its own merit and all of that, but as a general rule of thumb, that's, if you wanted to sum up the entrepreneurial spirit, that's kind of it. That's kind of it. It's like, I identified this thing and I can actually do something about it. Yeah. And so I've already confirmed, yes, this is happening. Yeah. Now we're going to figure it out. Yeah. So what was the learning curve for that particular venture for when you got the equipment to you're like, all right, I'm producing the shirts now?
Yeah, so it was a good transition because there's so many aspects to screen printing that you had to learn. It was actually making the stencils for the screens. So yeah, so it was that, and it's a whole chemical process too. So it's like a creative and a technical process, which is kind of
science and art put together.
Yeah, so Beautiful. It was a lot of trial and error. A lot of YouTube videos, and then even after watching that, it's kind of like, this still didn't work. It didn't come out right, or the stencil kind of broke down through the printing process. So it was like trying to avoid errors like that and really getting the basics down of, all right, I could do this. I won't mess it up, and let's do it. Let's just print 200 shirts.
I'm going to ask a weird question. Yeah. So do you follow your heart?
Yeah, go for it.
What is your relationship with fear?
Relationship with fear, I think, and a quote that I like to tell people that I like to live by, fear is a good thing, but you have to know when to not be afraid. Mm-hmm. Because you have to know when to push forward and kind of take that leap of faith. Fear is a good thing because I think it keeps us in line.
And alive.
Yeah, and alive. Definitely alive. And it keeps you prepared for the worst possible outcome. Mm-hmm. So if and when that happens, you could slide into plan B easier. Sure. And you could kind of have something to fall back on, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't think people should be afraid necessarily to take that leap of faith or that risk. Like I said, I think it's good because it helps you prepare to take that leap of faith.
Right.
It gets you there. You don't go in blind, which is what a lot of people do.
That's so good. So in that answer, you talked about plan Bs, and understanding contingencies. And so that way, it's good to identify the fear, see it, and use it almost as like a motivational factor of like, okay, if this is here, maybe this is a sign that I need to push forward. That like I'm fearful, and that is a barrier to entry for a lot of people into this space in any industry, but wanting to start their own thing, solopreneur or whatever. So yeah, I think that's very powerful, man. And so the way that you would handle it when you run into those situations is you would actually sit and kind of come up with a game plan. Like, okay, this is the way that I'm going to go. Maybe not a detailed, like, all right, you're going to set this pick and I'm going to roll over,
Right.
But it's going to be, okay, I'm going to attack it this way. This is like, I'm going to get these t-shirts printed or whatever. If we stay in the line with your business, I'm going to have them printed in Florida because that's important to me to stay in the U.S., but if that doesn't work out, then I already have some ideas in the back of my head. Like, okay, I can tap in over here and here
like
to check
what's
these.
next.
Right. Yeah. And then also, what's that? Okay, what if we win? I know that's another thing that's interesting that I figured out is that a lot of people are actually more afraid of success than they are of failure.
That's true.
And that's
it's kind of, what do you do once you get there? Almost.
Right. Yeah.
What's next?
You've achieved the goal. I always love the analogy of seeing goals as mountains for this specific thing, where it's like you set a goal, like I want to get to the top of the mountain, and you spend all this time, you're prepping, you're working out, you want to make sure you have the endurance, you're hydrated. Then you go out there, you start trekking, you're prepared, right? You spend all this time preparing. You got your backpack, you got your water, food, all of it. You got tents, and you're working your way up, setting up base camp. Then you're going up another spot, then you're camping again, and you finally get to the top, and you're like, I prepared so long for this, and I worked so hard to get up here, and I'm up here, and it's gorgeous. The view's amazing. I can't believe that I actually did it. But what's the next thing that you do? Like, the only way to go from here is down.
Right.
Like I have to go down. And so then I always said, think of it as like a mountain range where it's not going down. It's like following different peaks, going to different parts and going up and continuing to have those goals. But if you don't think about that, just like you said, if you're not preparing for success, then you're going to run into that 5 seconds of happiness when you hit the goal.
Right.
Because that's like how long
you
it
hit
lasts.
a wall.
Yeah. Or you plateau and you're like, well, what am I trying to do?
Right.
So
I think that's kind of, if it's not always the mindset of an entrepreneur, it almost should be. It's always of what's next.
Yes.
I've been told so many times in my life by so many other people, why you always just enjoy where you are, stop thinking about what's next. I'm like, I just can't. It's always, what am I going to do next? What am I going to do next? And it's, a lot of it is adjusting along the way. Like when I started Rudy's Tees, I had no intention of doing custom apparel or even printing them really myself. It was kind of a demand that I saw. People would ask, I need, like fellow business owners would come up to me, I need shirts for my business, for my restaurant, for my bar. Could you do them? And it was just asked so many times. It was like, well, I got to do this because people are asking for it,
So that's very interesting because that goes into the idea of networking. So those relationships, how do those people find you? Did you have pre-existing relationships, and kind of what actions did you take to really forge that with the other businesses? Was it because your family owned businesses in the area and so they would kind of interact, or how did that work?
Mainly, I would say, was from growing up in Northport and working at Cafe Portofino, the coffee shop I worked at.
Interesting.
Because there were so many... Everyone went to that coffee shop, business owners, everyone would come in there. So what really helped me, I think, was having that, it was like pre-networking. I didn't even know I was going to do this until I had the idea, and I was a familiar face. Mm-hmm. So my boss let me, it was the first place I sold my shirts out of, was out of the cafe.
Brilliant.
So it was even better for me to sell because it would be people I would know would come in, hey, check out my shirts, they're right here.
Yeah.
And there was several other retail stores on Main Street, like consignment shops that already kind of knew me. I would approach them, hey, I have this idea, I'm selling these designs. So it was an easier in, yeah, sure, bring your shirts down, we'll sell them. So it was kind of that. I would say in the beginning, it was pretty much all word of mouth, selling the shirts, and especially when it got to doing the custom orders, custom printing. I would say in the beginning, it was like 80-20 word of mouth. And then as it kind of grew, it was still word of mouth, but I was doing a ton more marketing and advertising. So I was doing, once I got the equipment, I was like, okay, I'm in the custom screen printing business. It was, you have to be uncomfortable for a while where it's can't tell you how many places I've cold called or I've walked in, or reached out on Instagram. Can I do your staff uniforms? Can I print? And it was kind of overwhelming, the amount of the response that was like, yes. Some people, I think you're afraid of, why are they going to do it with me, or they're not going to respond.
Right.
So I would say, you never know. The worst they could say is no.
Yeah,
That's
and you're
it.
exactly
And you move
in the
on.
same position that you were in before the conversation
Exactly.
happened. Yeah.
And there were places where when I was first started, I would reach out to you, like, can I do your shirts? And I was still kind of new. So they were kind of like, maybe, whatever. And after I did it another year, they would either reach back out to me, or I would, it's always okay to circle back after a year. I would circle back, hey, these are the shirts that I've done for the other stores in the area, and then you would most likely
here's
get
my
the account.
progress. Like you can see that this is the level of professionalism and the level of quality that we're producing. Yeah.
Bringing samples was a huge thing.
How did you, when you were doing that initial marketing push and you were cold calling, you're reaching out to companies, how did you decide who to reach out to?
So mainly it was local places because I felt that I'd have a better chance of, like I said, having that familiar face, or, hey, I work at Cafe Portofino, or I've done shirts for X, Y, and Z business on Main Street. So like it was very localized at first. And really deciding which places to reach out for was to see if they had a need for that. Like there was a bar in Northport. I would always see people wearing their shirts, and they had a very basic design or whatever. So I kind of had the approach of like, what do they need? They obviously already do T-shirts. It's like, okay, some places like that, I would just come up with unique designs on my own. And you run the risk of them kind of stealing it. But it's just like, hey, I love your business. I've grew up looking at your business and seeing it. I think these designs are great. Can I print these shirts? And like sometimes they're just kind of taken aback, like, oh, you already put time into this, or oh, I love this design, or let's come up with something better. So that's kind of a selling point almost.
This is like, everyone pause, rewind, go back to the beginning of what Brandon was just saying, because this is like a textbook lesson of exactly how to start if you want to initiate like a real word of mouth campaign and you want to get real traction. Is all of these things. I'm going to try to break it down and add in anything that I miss. Just from like the fundamentals, if we were like teaching this in a class. So you've gained an expertise. You spent time investing in yourself and investing in a skill where you can produce something of high quality. You also have education and a background, which you can get formally through Farmingdale State College and places like that, or you can learn through experience and doing it over and over and over again. So you develop the raw talent and the skill to be able to do so, and the capacity to deliver. And then you look around you and you find people who are already interested in the type of products that you're selling because they already have them, and it's great. And you're looking also specifically through a lens of where are the places that I really enjoy going to, that I go to, and I've spent a lot of time there and I love it. Right. And so there's already a relationship there, even if it's more one-sided as far as like recognition from like us to them, to the business. But then you go to that and then you look and you just look at the design. If they have killer t-shirts, awesome. I would tell them and just be like, hey, you guys are great. I actually do this and I love what you did, because I'm looking at some of the other places I go to and they don't really have great shirts, but like you're like a model for this. So even if you're not trying to sell them, you're still developing a relationship. That conversation, and if they want one down the road, then they're like, oh, remember this guy? So, but then like you just go through that. And so you're picking out of a very selected queue where you have this shared bond and relationship. Like there's more trust when you're from the same place, and especially when you know about what they're into. That's really what it comes down to.
Absolutely.
It's like, how into the thing that they're doing are you?
Right.
And how much of that, because that helps to build a relationship.
Oh yeah.
Like I've been going to your business for years, and I love, like, if you get the more specific and real and honest, don't make this up. Right. But if you love their Taco Tuesday specials, like, dude, I'm here every Tuesday. That's right. This is my spot.
And small business owners love hearing that.
Yes.
They love supporting other local businesses, and they're always so passionate about their business. So, you compliment their business or tell them, oh, I've been coming here my whole life and I love it. It means a lot more, I think, than most people think.
Yeah, it does. Because we're people.
Yeah.
We're all people at the end of the day. And so like having that level of acceptance and appreciation, especially because owning a business is so much work. Obviously, like it's a grind. And so when you're doing, but it's typically you're passionate about it. So it's like this passionate grind. But you do it for so long, and like how much gratitude is actually being expressed. So even for those out there that aren't looking to seek and start their own entrepreneurial venture, like just thank your local small business for the work they're doing. If you go there and you appreciate it,
it's a lot of work running a small business.
Yeah,
or a large business.
100%. All right, so one of the things that you had brought up before outside of the podcast was the importance of knowing when to shift in business. And so talk to us about that. What do you mean?
So knowing when to either expand your business or kind of go into another market or different locations, stuff like that. So after about, I would say maybe a couple of years of doing Rudy's Tees, I was kind of maxed out in Northport. So we had partnerships with the Northport Historical Society, doing the real vintage shirts, doing like integrated marketing with them and events, selling on their website, stuff like that. So it was kind of always having that mindset we were talking about before. What's next? Where am I going next? I already kind of had an idea. I was like, oh, I'm going to Green Lawn and Huntington after this. So that was kind of a good stepping stone because it helped me enter into another town to expand, next town over, next town over. So we had similar partnerships like with the Northport Historical Society, with Huntington and Greenlawn. And then going there, I was able to start getting businesses in Huntington, Greenlawn for the custom side of the business. And after that, it was really kind of exploded as far as word of mouth. Because then I was getting people reaching out to me, which is like a cool feeling after you start a business a few years. People are like, I've heard about you. Like, I want to use your service. You just kind of like, what?
Such validation.
Yeah. We were doing all over Long Island. We were doing some places out east, South Shore, even further west. Then there were other people who I've known through my dad in like the entertainment business that they were doing Comic-Con in the city, and they were like, we need shirts for Comic-Con. It's like, that's such a cool feeling. Like, I'm doing like
for such a big thing, too. That's huge.
It was a cool feeling to have that happen.
Incredible. Yeah. So how much of a demand increase was that? Like, did you have to shift any sort of like your operations in order to meet demand for all of the new incoming business, or how did that work?
So it was kind of, as far as knowing when to shift, so I was doing solely screen printing. So I had a 4-color press, so I was limited to really do 4 colors.
Sure.
So there was also another print method called heat transfer. You actually have it's like a big iron and you lay down the design or whatever. I was very, very nervous trying to get into that because I always thought of heat transfers as a poor quality print.
Yeah,
and
I had that impression too.
Yeah, so
but I don't know. I don't have nothing to back it up. That's just
yeah. It's definitely the cheaper side of it, but there's a handful of companies where they can make the transfers for you, actually screen printed transfers.
Oh,
and so I was like, I gotta check this place out. So I went to their place, got samples, did test prints, and I would put all my shirts through the ringer, like literally in the wash. Throw them in there. It says wash it inside out in cold water. I'm washing it in hot water, regular side, just to see how it lasts.
Yes.
And dry it on high heat, and they would hold up really nice. Like, I would say like 90%, if not the same, like 90% of like a regular screen print.
Incredible.
So doing that test and then kind of knowing when to shift, that really helped me expand. Okay, I could do 8-color prints now. I could do a little more intricate of designs,
sure.
And still offer it at a good price. So that was when the company, I think it was called Rocket Ship Entertainment, I think they did, I think it was almost 500 pieces that they wanted for Comic-Con for their booth. So we did that, and that was among several different designs. And then doing other things like that, we would do Cal Harbor Day every year, which is an event in Northport. And that was always a big sales day for us because we would sell probably about between 100 and 150 pieces just that day. Pieces meaning T-shirts, sweatpants, bags, hats, kind of a variety like that. That was always such an important day because it wasn't only just the sales, but it was the networking. People would come to the booth, hear about us, you could tell them about the services. Mm-hmm. That was always a big day. We would get a lot of business from that day, not just having the physical, selling the tangible items that day.
That's almost like a good byproduct of being there. Yeah. It's like the networking is the goal, and cool, and we're having our time paid for as well for being here.
I would say about 60 to 70% of the people that we would give info on like custom screen printing from that day would always reach out.
Wow!
So that was, for me, that's a great turnaround.
You'd be surprised just how many people out there are, whether or not they own their own business and they're looking for some shirts or uniforms or whatever, or other people that just coach a basketball team or that run this organization or have this event coming up and they want these different things for it. It's just the opportunities are very robust if you're willing to put yourself out there.
Absolutely.
That's very cool. I like that.
Yeah, you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, we would take out ads a lot in the local newspapers. Or just always seeing people getting familiar with your logo and your brand, just seeing it, even if they're not necessarily interested in it right away. It's like,
brand familiarization.
Yeah. I can't tell you how many times we would do Cal Harbor Day. We did that like 5 or 6 years in a row.
Wow.
And they would walk by, I've heard about you guys. I've seen you around. Tell me more about it. So it's just, you have to be out there.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. Can people still buy shirts through the business or?
Through some of the Nest on Main on Northport Village is a consignment shop. They still have them.
Great. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Yes, check it out if you're in the area. Yeah. Do you have any sort of advice, maybe like top 3 tips for people that are considering starting their own business or shifting into this space? My
first word of advice would be just start, because I feel like so many people get hung up on how I'm going to start, where am I going to go next kind of thing. Trust me, you'll figure it out as you go. And it's like, I think for a lot of people, getting past that initial, I started. For me, I was just like, I'm just going to start. I came up with one design. I'm like, I'm just going to print it and try to sell them. which is kind of almost, like test the market almost,
Right.
kind of doing that. And then you figure out the rest as you go along. Okay, I did this worked, or this didn't work. How could I change it? I always feel like it's easier to work with something that you have and adjust it than really starting from scratch. It's such a cool feeling though when you do start from scratch and then end up going somewhere that's like, oh, I started this from nothing. That's so cool. The second piece of advice I would give is like really put yourself out there. You really have to network, and you can't be shy so much. Go to the networking events, go put yourself out there, talk to people, meet people, because there were so many seeds that I've planted starting Rudy's Teas, like meeting people, even if I felt it was a little early, like have my shirts in the store. I didn't have a lot of inventory or whatever, but people knew who you are. You introduced yourself, and it wasn't until maybe like a year or two later, they already knew who I was. They remembered me. Oh, I remember when you started. I see you have this now. Like, yes, we'd love to have you. So it's never a bad thing to network, get yourself out there, and kind of push yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone. I mean, I definitely wasn't comfortable cold calling, first no one is, ever, even a seasoned salesperson, it's kind of like, it's always that little awkward, like, you don't know who I am, I don't know who you are, and
it's not the way that we were ever meant to communicate.
Exactly.
As people. So yeah, that's interesting. That's really good.
And if you could get past that, I do believe it gets easier.
Sure.
As you go, because once you have that brand and stuff behind you, I've done this work. There are other sales tools in your toolbox, and it makes it easier to get the sale.
Yeah. Yeah, I know you can show past work, historical work, and so it's like the biggest struggle is making sure you have that. You need to get those done in the reps underneath of you so you can push forward. Right. That's great, man. That's phenomenal. What a crazy story. We could go on for hours. Like I didn't tap into half the stuff that I was really interested like in the past and everything, and really looking at that. But it's like growing up in an entrepreneurial family, huge deal. What you're saying as far as kind of practical steps that people can take to start getting into this, or start understanding the mindset of what it takes. It's not complicated. It's not to say it's easy, but it's kind of simple. You identify a need, and we've gone through a bunch of this a lot through a bunch of the different episodes. But yeah, and then being willing, having the courage to put yourself out there, because courage doesn't exist without fear.
I think people underestimate the ability of starting small. They have an idea for a business. Oh, I want to be able to offer all these services or have all these products. And I would say most of the time that is not how businesses start. I started with one design and no screen printing press, had them printed, and you just grow from there. Yeah. You go to the next thing, It's a slow process kind of in general. You're not jumping in to a million things at once. I think I can't emphasize enough the importance and like the value, I guess, of starting small. That's what my takeaway
I love it
from the whole thing.
Brandon, you're the man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.